a little red dot that will say that it's recording. So welcome. Before we get started any further, I just want to quickly remind you, for those of you who are just joining us now, if you can mute your microphone and your video, that will help us to not have feedback as we kind of walk through some things today. And then also I'd like to encourage you to use the chat feature, which you will see on your screen on the far right-hand side. Courtney from our team is going to kind of monitor the chat because as I'm sharing my screen, I'm able to see and follow that chat. But Courtney and I have a plan in place here, so she'll follow that. She'll answer as she can, and she'll interrupt me as needed. So go ahead and use that. And then, like I said, we are recording this right now. So if you don't want to give your consent to recording, please make sure to use that chat and interrupt us so I can stop the recording. But our purpose this morning is really to just go through some basic Moodle functions that we have. And I'm going to start really, really basic and kind of work us through to some things we can do with assignments and pieces like that. But I'm going to start here by just taking my screen and showing you two different ways to even access Moodle for those of you who maybe aren't comfortable with just getting into Moodle to begin with. So one of the ways you can access Moodle is to just open a tab on your screen, and you can type in moodle.bethel.edu, and you'll come up with this screen right here where you can log in. So I can add my login information here. And patiently wait while Moodle will log in for me here. So this is one way to get to Moodle, and you can see all the different courses I have listed here, including this basic Moodle webinar. You do not have this, but this is what we'll use today to walk through some things. I also want to show you a second way to get into Moodle, and that is by opening a tab and going to your my.bethel.edu. So if you go under that tab, which is full of alerts I see right now, but you can go under your faculty academics, and you can also see all of your courses there, and you can choose from any one of those courses. Here are some courses I'm teaching right now. You can click on Moodle and it will take you to those courses. So you can choose what works best for you to enter Moodle, but those are kind of two different ways that you can access this wonderful technology that we're going to be talking about today. Once you are in Moodle, one of the things you'll need to do is decide which course you want to work on first. So you can see on the left-hand side here, I've got a lot of my courses are listed here. We have the middle section here where I can also see courses. It doesn't matter which spot you choose your course from. For today's purposes, I'm just going to click on this basic Moodle webinar because that's the one we're going to go through. And you'll notice that this middle section of Moodle is the one that we're using most often. This is kind of our main section right here. On the right-hand side, if you look at my screen here, you would see this in your Moodle courses as well. You have some things here called blocks. This has the people, participants that you have in your course, the calendar. Your blocks may look a little bit differently because we do have the ability to change the blocks that we see. But that's what's on the right-hand side of your screen. On the left-hand side of your screen is what we call the menu drawer. And in this menu, you can see the list of the courses that you have. You can also, now that I've opened up a course, see all the different pieces of that course. So I can see week by week by week what's in that course. Before we go any further, I also would like to just acknowledge that this is a time that if you're not overly familiar with Moodle, If there's something we're going through today, we're going really through the basics to keep everybody functioning and functioning well. This isn't a time to necessarily say, hey, that's a really cool trick. I didn't know that was out there. And to try something new. Use the things that you're currently using. It's not that you can't try something new, but this is not really a great time to try all kinds of new features. Use the ones that you're comfortable with and the things that you need to make sure that you and your students are able to function and to function well, and that you are able to keep teaching and your students are able to keep learning. Are there any questions yet in how to get into Moodle, or are we ready to kind of keep moving on? Can you just give Courtney a thumbs up? All right, let's keep moving on. When you are working in Moodle, you have this gear up on top that I can show you, this actions menu. You are probably familiar with this because this is what you use when you turn your course on for students. So if I go under that and I go under edit settings, the only one on here that you likely may need to use is this one right here where it says course visibility. I have it set to show right now. Some of you, when you import a template, have it on hide, and that's when you do all of your work before sharing it out with students. You can also add a description or a course image, things like that. But the main piece that you would want here is to make sure that your course visibility for students is on show instead of on hide. That way students can see the course. The other piece with this gear icon that's really important for us to know and to use is this one right here that says turn editing on. Prior to this, if you look in my middle screen here, it looks similar to the way that a student would see this. They have the ability to go through, complete things, check them off as they've finished a project or an assignment. But once I hit turn editing on, I have all of these additional little icons to work with. We're going to work through today how to use these different icons here and what they mean. And we're going to start, let me make sure I'm covering everything I need to here. We're going to start, actually, I'm going to go up to the top here before we start kind of doing some changes in the middle section here. And I'm just going to make sure that you also know up above here where you can see my name, and I can click on that. This is a spot where if you want to, before you open up your course to students, or even if it's open up to students and you want to change this, you can go under profile and change your profile. You may not have much in there right now, and this may be a time that you actually want to add a little bit extra for your students to know just something more about you. You may want to add a picture there if you don't have a picture. For some of your students, if they're used to meeting face-to-face and you were making the switch to online, at least temporarily, it may be nice for them to still have a picture to see for you. So to do that, again, you just go up to this profile spot with your picture. It's also important for you to know that down below here, the final choice you have is switch role to. And when I click on mine, you're going to see a lot of different things because I have lots of roles I can choose. But you can choose student, and you will be able to view the screen as a student would view it. That can be really, really helpful when you're changing some things around and you want to know how your students will view it. So that's an option for you. And then when you go back here, you can just go back to switch to my normal role, and it will go back to your normal role. All right. So now that I'm in my Moodle course and I've turned my editing on, there's lots of things I can do with the pieces that are here. If I go to each individual activity, I can now go under that one. And there's another gear here that's edit settings. We'll use that a little bit more later on. But right now I want to show you that you can do things like indent something, move it to the right. If that makes sense for you, especially with an assignment, we've got some listed further here where it makes more sense to add an assignment. For example, right here where there's an inventory response assignment, the Google Docs students will be using for that assignment, it makes sense to indent that so we can move that right. Or you can go ahead and move it back left. It can also be really helpful for you if, for example, you had this inventory response, and if this is an assignment you want students to do multiple times, you can also do duplicate, put it in there once, and duplicate the assignment, and then you can move that down to, let's say, the next week. So that saves you a little bit of time, and it also makes sure that that assignment, that you're not having room for error by recreating the assignment. If you've got it and it works well, keep using it. You can also, I'm going to go back up here to the one I started with. We're going to move this back to the left. You can also choose on here whether or not to show things. So you will notice some of the things on my screen here are gray versus blue. The things that are gray are things that students don't see. I don't have those marked as show. I have them marked as hidden. If you switch it to show, it will turn blue, and that means that anybody who's on this course site will then be able to see it. So if there's something you want to keep in your course site for yourself, but you don't want students seeing it, just go ahead and go under this tab here and mark hide. You will also notice as I'm going through this today that there are some I'm skipping over. Those are things, hello, whoever joined, that at this point in time, things are set really well and we don't need to make changes unless you're really comfortable with Moodle, in which case you're probably not joining this webinar. A lot of the things are already set up in the way that they work best for Bethel. So if I'm skipping over something today, it is most likely because it's something we really don't need to make changes to at this point in time. Now that I'm on this spot here on my screen, though, I do want to show you one more thing. If you go and watch where my cursor is, there are many times that you're going to be working in your site that you can just go right up to the top here to this navigation. These are called breadcrumbs as they kind of go along, and you can just back up one by one by one with your breadcrumbs to get back to where you've been. Okay, so far we know how to get into Moodle, a couple of different ways to do that. You know how to change and edit your profile. You know how to turn editing on so that we can work within this course. And you know how to kind of use some of those real basic tools to move things around so students can see them, or you can hide them, that you can add them underneath an assignment if it makes sense. And I've shown you how to duplicate things so you don't have to recreate the wheel. Are there any questions that you have thus far before we start talking about how to add an assignment? right. Court, feel free to turn on your microphone and interrupt if there's any time I need to stop, okay?
Sounds good.
All right. As we go down on this Moodle page, we can see that your Moodle site should already be set up with dates for each week that you have left in this semester. And within these weeks, one of the things I want to start with is looking at assignments. These are one of the activities that we can add in Moodle. And actually, let's back up just a little bit. Let me show you how to add an assignment or any sort of activity. Let's go through that first. When you have your Moodle week set up, at the very bottom of each week or each module, you have this button here that says add an activity or a resource. And I'm going to click on that right now. And remember, you can only see this and click on this if you have your Moodle site open and ready for editing. You've turned editing on. And you can click add a resource. Here's the list of resources you can choose from. For today's purposes, and actually as we go through this transition to putting some things online, we aren't going to use all of these resources. It's not that they're not helpful at some point in time, but we're going to stick with kind of the basics. We're going to use the assignment resource. We are going to use the forum. And actually, I should not say resource, activity. We are going to use the assignment activity. We're going to use the forum activity. We're going to use the quiz activity. Those are the main ones that we're going to talk about today, and I'll show you the basics of how to use each of those. So let's start with assignment. If I click on assignment and then add, I will get a page that really is just a form that I can fill out and put information in about an assignment for a student. So if I want to make up an assignment, and let's just call it check-in. And I want students to just submit something perhaps that says, let me know you are doing okay. Submit a 200 to 300 word check-in journal response. I can add a little description of what I need students to do for this assignment. If I had a file, if I wanted to choose maybe a Microsoft Word file that I want students to use, I can drop and drag it here, or I can click on add and choose a file to put in there, whether it be a syllabus, actually, or a rubric. If I want them to see a different rubric, I can add that in there. And then one of the most important pieces I think that we'll find ourselves using here with assignments is talking about due dates. I'm going to hit show more for now. I think it's going to be really important for us as we move forward to make sure that we enable due dates for students so they know when something has to be submitted by. You can also use some of these other functions here, like remind me to grade by, or if there is a date you don't want students submitting after. I think at this point, it's probably good to let students submit things as they get it done. So maybe not tell them they can't submit until a certain point, but you know your courses best. You know what works for you. So as you go down with the assignment, there are also two different types of submissions students can make for assignments. So in my example here, if I wanted students just to do a check-in, I would actually want to click online text. That allows students to, within the assignment window, when they go to submit something, they can type right into that window, and I can see that without having to open a separate file. For some of the things students do, it's actually important for them to do a separate file and then attach that. You can choose one or both of these as submission types that you want students to use. I also, when I teach online, tend to use this enable button and put word limits. This is not a minimum word count, but this helps students know, for example, if they're doing some online text, maybe you want to hold them to 500 words versus 1,000 so that they can stay on track with that. This part here, maximum number of uploaded files. This is preset at 20. You may decide that you only want students submitting a certain number of files. So this is where you can change that. This section here, maximum submission size, is set at the highest already. So you shouldn't need to mess with anything here. And again, for our purposes, you really just want to know when you add an assignment, add a title for the assignment, add a description for students of what they want to do or what you want them to do. Add additional files if there's something you want them looking at specifically for the assignment. Add a due date. I think that's going to be really helpful for students during this point in time. And then choose what submission types there are. These other pieces, like I had mentioned earlier, are already preset in ways that work well. So unless you're super familiar with Moodle, it's not that you can't make changes to them, but this is also a time you may want to just trust the system and that we have things set in the ways that typically work best for most students and most instructors. Feedback types. I'm going to leave this as it is as well. Submission settings, there's nothing you need to do. Group submission settings, this does allow students to submit in groups. If you have small groups set up within your Moodle course, which we can also talk about today, they can submit in groups. However, one of the things I would say as a designer is even when students work in groups, we still want them to submit something individually. This can help us on the back end of things if students have trouble with a grade and they have questions about it. It's really helpful to be able to go back and to see everything that that student specifically has submitted. I'm going to go to this piece here called Turnitin. Some of you are very familiar with Turnitin and already use this. For those of you who have not used Turnitin, this is especially helpful if students are doing an assignment that's not just a personal journal reflection, although it's helpful for that as well to make sure they're not turning in someone else's journal reflection. But I tend to use this for some of those bigger assignments where it's really important to make sure students are doing their own work. And Turnitin, if this is enabled, students will see this on their end of things when they submit their work. And this allows us as instructors to be able to see if students have done any copying of any work. There's a report that you will get when students use Turnitin and submit something through Turnitin, which will give you a percentage of the number of words that are the same as something else that has been submitted. And that's what these boxes are here for. If it's against something they've submitted perhaps for a course that they had last year or last semester, they can check against the internet. I would leave all of these again as they're already preset to check against journals, periodicals, publications that are out there. It does not mean necessarily that this is wrong if a student, something shows up, for example, that a student has quoted something from another journal. We actually want them to look at those things, but you want to, as an instructor, to be able to make sure that the student has given the correct citation with that as well. You can choose how many batches of, how many words students can have together. There are some of the disciplines where you may have a phrase that's very common in your discipline, and you may want to change this from 5 words to maybe 10 words so that you're getting a little bit more accurate data from Turnitin when you see that report. You can also attach a rubric to assignments. This is a Turnitin rubric, not a Bethel created rubric. I would recommend, if you aren't already using this rubric manager through Turnitin, this isn't a great time to start using it, but it is definitely something going forward you may want to look at. When students submit assignments, you can choose how you would like to grade those assignments. So this you will see is already set at point, and the maximum number of points that you want the assignment to be worth. It's set at simple direct grading. I would recommend that you stick with simple direct grading unless you have a grading guide or a rubric that you are already using. Or if you would like to use a grading guide or a rubric, I would recommend that you set up an appointment with one of the instructional designers we have, and Court can actually put in chat the form that you can fill out, but we can help you with what it looks like to set up a grading guide or a grading rubric. For now, and for the purposes of this webinar, we're going to stick with simple direct grading. We don't have categories set up. Oh, I do have some categories set up. We'll go through this a little bit later today in this webinar with gradebook categories. But if you have something that's using simple direct grading, you can choose which category you want it to be in as well. The rest of these things, again, I would leave as they are. Restrict access can be helpful if you want students to not be able to do a certain assignment unless something else is finished. So you can choose maybe that it's not until a certain date, or they have to have a certain grade to be able to do something, or to complete a certain activity. And Court, actually, can you just put the link in there for the form if you can get it from one of Ross's emails initially about the form students or instructors should fill out for us?
Yes.
The one that will go to the desk and we can triage from there, okay? Thank you. All right, so there's lots that we can do here when we add an assignment for a student. Rather than feel overwhelmed with all that I've just kind of walked through, and I know it feels a little bit quick, I want you to remember when you add an assignment, it really is just a form that opens up for you. You can add the name of the assignment in there. For those of you who have a syllabus that's working well, I would recommend just going straight through your syllabus. Add your assignment name, add a description. As much as you can mirror what's already in your syllabus, I think that's best for you and best for students. Add additional files if you want to add additional files that are very specific to this assignment. Remember that files you would add here are files that students are only going to see when they are in that assignment. If there's other files you want them to use, I'll show you how to put those back on that main Moodle page. And then again, a due date can be really helpful. And file submission types. If you want it online where you see it all in one place on your screen, or if you want them to submit files. And if they are submitting files, remember, for you as an instructor, that means you likely have to open and download their file, which can be really helpful if it's something like a Microsoft Word document that you can then open up and make comments on. before sending it back to students. So with that, are there any questions on adding an assignment? I'm going to go back here and use my breadcrumbs to navigate back to my main page. But if you have a question on adding an assignment, go ahead and put it in the chat. And Court will try to help, or she will interrupt me and we can make sure we cover it for everyone. This is the little icon also that will show up when you add an assignment for students. All right, now that you've hit the edit button and added that assignment, I'm sorry, gone down and added that activity, you can also, if you need to make changes, go under your edit button, edit settings, and that will take me right back to, this is the sample assignment, not the one I had just created, but that will take you right back to that initial form where you can see this is one that's set up. There's the due date in there, submission types. So once you put your assignment in there, if there's something you want to change, you can just click on that edit button that you can see my cursor moving over right here. All right. I do want to show you also, if you are unfamiliar with Moodle or have not used it and aren't super comfortable with it yet, when students have submitted assignments, this is what it will look like for a student. When they click on, they would see if there's something added there. They'll be able to access it from that once they're in the assignment. And then for you as an instructor, you can view all submissions, or you can choose to just simply go to grading from here. If I go to grade, you will see we have some fake students in here. They all have the last name of Moodle. Benjamin Moodle, Jerry Moodle, Joe, and Mary Moodle. It looks like Benjamin has not submitted his assignment yet. It's okay, because he still has 19 days and 14 hours until it's due. But his assignment, if I had used the online text, it would show up right here in this middle section. If Benjamin had submitted an assignment that was attached, I would see it right here and I could download it onto my screen. Here's where I can give feedback as an instructor. If a student has submitted something that's in Microsoft Word and I download it, I make my edits, I can save it then and drop and drag it here to give it back to the student. This is also where you can choose if a student has submitted something and you want them to redo something to allow them to have another attempt. You also, as an instructor, may find it helpful to view all submissions. And this will show you, actually, I have no students who've submitted anything right now, so we're gonna go back on that one. But view all submissions. I'm looking for one here that may have some students have submitted things. Oh, here we go. We have 4 students who've submitted some things. So I can hit view all submissions and I can see that each of my students have submitted something for grading. I can, from this page, also hit grade and it will take me right back to the spot that I was at for Benjamin Moodle earlier. I can see that Benjamin has submitted something. This is what it looks like through online text. I can also see that he's attached something here. This is his inventory. So when I click on that, I can see that it downloads and then I can open it up right from my download here. I can also see, it turns out with Benjamin Moodle, that there's a rubric or a grading guide, a grading guide that had been attached, where I could go through and not just give him points for his assignment, but really use this grading guide to add up those points for him. And again, if you have not used grading guides before and are used to grading with just giving a set number of points, keep doing that. But if you would like some advice and you would like one of our instructional designers or someone on our team to help talk you through how to create a grading guide or a grading rubric, this is also a really good time to do that, and just set up an appointment with one of us or fill out the form that Courtney has hopefully shared with you by now, that Ross also sent out in an earlier email. And we will set up some time with you to talk through what works best for your course. All right, so assignments are going to be important here for students to be able to submit things for us. They're going to be important for us as instructors to be able to see where students are at and to help with their learning from online here. I'm going to go back to my main page, and we're going to go on from adding an assignment to adding a forum. So I'm going to go right back to this add an activity or a resource, and I'm going to add an activity, and this time I'm going to choose forum. We also are doing a webinar a little bit later today that's going to go through some great ways to have discussions online with students, and we're going to go a little bit deeper into forums at that point in time. I know it's today and a few other times throughout this week and next week. But for now, whoops, I'm going to go down so you can see the bottom of my screen here, forum, and I'm just going to click add. Just like when adding an assignment, when you add a forum, you'll get a form that you can fill out for this forum information. So we're going to put a title in our forum, and you will find on the back end of things when you're grading, it's helpful to not name things forum 1, forum 2, forum 3, because when you're grading, it's difficult to see in the little bit, the few words or letters that are at the top of your grading page, which forum you're on. So it's helpful to name your forum something like data on Corona. Okay, so maybe I'm going to have students look and see what data is on there on coronavirus, or let's be more accurate and call it COVID-19. And this is a discussion I want students to have. Perhaps I want them to know kind of how to look and see what's accurate out there and have some discussion about how they think things are going. In this description box, I can tell students what I need them to do. It's helpful to say in an initial post and give students some questions maybe they should reflect on. And then to say in your response to others, and give them some guidance here so that you have more than just good job or I agree. Give them some guiding questions. So that it really can be a discussion back and forth between students and not just one-sided giving information. Here in forums, again, I would use standard forum. There are some other options you can choose, and we have some Confluence pages that actually I will show you right now how to get to Confluence if that's something you're unfamiliar with. But for now, we're going to leave it at standard forum. I'm going to flip over here just for a second, and just like we could type moodle.bethel.edu, you also can go to Confluence And this is a spot that we have lots of information on how to do things. So you could, in the search bar, put forums, for example, and we have lots of information, step by step, how to use forums. Creating a new discussion topic, what this looks like, how to reply, the different forum types. So anything we're covering today that you want more information on, I would encourage you looking at these Confluence articles as well. For now, we'll keep going. We're going to keep it at standard forum use. I find it helpful when I am teaching to have a word count displayed for forums. So I do tend to change this because I have a requirement that students on their initial post, it's 250 to 500 words, I think is what it is. Maybe it's 400 to 500 words, but I have the word count so students can see as they're adding things where they're at. You can also choose if you want students to be able to add attachments or not to forums. Most of the rest of these things here, I think I would leave as is. You can choose if it's an optional subscription. Most of the time I would recommend that there's a forced subscription, but most students already have their forums set as that, so they can see as people post things in there. In a little bit, we'll go through grading, and you'll have forums put in a forum category, most likely, unless you want to call it something else. This we could actually maybe choose participation if we wanted it to go into that category. Right now, we would not recommend using ratings. I would recommend just using the module settings that are already in here. I'm going to save and return to course. And you will see, I didn't get this far on the sample assignment because I had backed out. But when you go all the way through and adding an activity and save and return to course, it will always show up at the bottom of your module or your week that you're working on. When you have something that's entered and you want to move it up, so for example, I don't want this forum at the very end of the week. I want students to participate in this in the middle of the week. I don't want them to save it to the end because then it's not truly a discussion. You can click on this little crossbar here, and when you're on that, you can move things around. You will see on my screen that I actually have some labels added in here. Begin the week, participate in the week's activities, and by the end of the week. These can be really helpful, especially in this point in time, for students to know how and when they should be doing things. There's a lot of information that will be coming at students right now in ways they may not be used to getting it. I would recommend anything that takes more than one student, any small group activity, any discussions you want students to have, go into this participate in the week's activities. That's because when I have something due, a typical individual assignment, it's due at the end of the week or the end of the module for students. They have that entire time to work on it. If there's something that requires interaction, I actually really want 2 due dates for that. So if we have a forum, for example, if it's due on Tuesday evening, I actually want students starting to work on that forum by Saturday at noon. That's something I can communicate out to students and have them start and at least put an initial post by, for example, Saturday at noon. You as an instructor can decide what's best for your course and communicate that out. But that really allows students to have a discussion instead of just simply posting at the very end what their thoughts are. So those labels can be helpful. And as you add activities, you can use this bar right here to move them around on the page. I'll pause for a minute. Court, can you let me know if there's any questions coming in that we need to address before I talk a little bit about quizzes?
I believe I have addressed the questions that have come up.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. I know also as a teacher, let me speak to everyone right now and say, I know this is so much information at once. So I am hoping that we're not going too fast through this, but that you're able to see lots of different things and that you will we'll post this video when we're done recording this webinar. And you can go back to that. And I'm hoping I'm giving you enough for you to know that there's some good options out there, and also giving you some ways that you can get more information, whether it be through the Confluence articles on your own or filling out a form and having our group meet with you if it means meeting with you, or to just give you some more information on how to go deeper into each of these things. We're going to go and we're going to add an activity now one more time. And this time we're going to choose quiz, and we're going to add a quiz. Again, just like when we added an assignment and when we added a forum, this takes us to a page where we can fill out information about a quiz. So let's say we are going to take a quiz on acronyms used in our discipline. I can put a description here and I can say students can take this quiz multiple times until, actually I'm talking directly to students, so I could say you can take this quiz multiple times until you reach a score of 8 out of 10 or higher. Or I could say, you can take this quiz once. I could tell them this quiz is timed. I have lots of options here, but this is a good spot to tell them even what the quiz is about. When we have quizzes, just like when we have assignments, and we can enable when the assignment is due and be very specific about that. With quizzes, we can choose when we want the quiz to be open, when we want it to be closed, and we can also enable a time limit on it. So as an instructor, I tend to have quizzes open for a shorter amount of time than the entire module, but I still tend to have it open for at least a day or two for students to be able to take it someplace where it's quiet and they can be uninterrupted and focused on it. You can also add a time limit on it. This can be really helpful if I have, for example, a 10-question quiz, I maybe only want to allow students a minute per question to read the question and to respond. This can be helpful also for those I know who are worried about cheating, which can be something that happens, especially now when we're going online. You may feel that a little bit more pressure about that. So if you set a time limit for students and write good questions for students, that will keep them focused and on track and not giving them endless minutes to go through their books or their notes to find the correct answer. When you grade quizzes, again, when we get to the grade book at the end of this webinar, I'll show you how to set up these categories, but you can choose which category your quiz goes into. You can also choose if there's a grade that students need to have to pass the quiz. And how I mentioned, you may decide that students can take it multiple times until they have a passing grade, you can set that here. If you want them perhaps to have 2 attempts, in which case you can then choose, you want them to have the highest grade, the average grade, only their first attempt, which to me would say only give them 1 attempt. One thing I'm going to point out here too, I've kind of glossed over this accidentally today, but there are these little question marks as you're going through Moodle. If you click on the question mark, you will find more information about whatever it is in Moodle that you're looking at. So that's another spot beyond the Confluence articles and beyond talking to our team, something that you can see and get information from. All right. When you are setting up a quiz, you will see that this is preset to say a new page. Every question is on a new page. The reason I would recommend sticking with this as it is, with every question is on a new page, is because Moodle will be saving those quizzes as students take them. Each page is saved. So if you have 10 questions on a page and a student does 3 questions and then their internet goes down, they would have to redo that entire page. If you have 1 question per page, it keeps saving all the way along. So if a student does 3 questions and they are on 3 different pages and then their internet goes down, they still have the answers to those 3 questions saved. So I would recommend keeping this as it is. You can choose the question behavior. Again, I would recommend keeping this the way that it is. Shuffling within questions, this can help with those who are worried about students perhaps cheating or asking others for help. You can also change this to know if you want your A, B, C, D, for example, if you do multiple choice questions to stick as A, B, C, D, you could change that to no. I will also show you in just a minute when we add a quiz question, how you can add it there as well. When you create a quiz for students, one of the things you'll need to look at are the review options that students have. I recommend that you have the attempt and the points checked for students. I would recommend unclicking the other boxes here so that when a student is in the middle of their quiz, they simply see what their answer is for the attempt and how many points it's worth. After the quiz is closed, and this means that no one else is taking that quiz, it's closed for students, then you may want to leave all of these boxes here, telling them whether it's correct, giving them feedback if you've taken the time to put feedback in specific questions. I would leave this appearance as it is for students. I would not make any changes here to the restrictions, to that overall feedback, to common module settings. I would leave these things just as they are. So the pieces that I might change if I'm putting a quiz together would be the time limit, the opening and the closing of the quiz, add a name to your quiz, and add a description of the quiz. This is another spot where you may even just want to say this quiz addresses chapters 1, 2, and 3. So I'm going to save this quiz and go back to my course. And because I've just created this activity, I can see that it shows up right here at the very bottom of my week. If I want to, I can move that up and about, or I could leave it where it is. I'm actually going to switch over right now to this sample quiz that's already set up in here and show you what this looks like. So if I click on sample quiz, I can see this has been set up for me. And if I attempt the quiz now, I can see what it looks like for students. Here's where you can see that every question is on a new page. So I can do that, and I can go to the next page and finish my attempt. This is what it would look like for students. I'm going to go back to this quiz that I set up, this acronyms quiz for a minute, and I'm going to show you that under this edit settings, I again get back to that page. That's the same thing you could use if you're setting up an assignment or setting up a forum. However, if I am on my acronyms quiz, I need to actually still add questions. So rather than edit quiz, I need to go into here, not edit the settings, but edit the quiz. When I first started building courses in Moodle, this was actually frustrating for me. I kept going to edit settings and I could not figure out how to add questions. So click on your quiz that you've built and then edit quiz. And this is where I can add questions. So I'm going to click on add a new question, and I can choose what type of question I want to use. As I've already mentioned, and will probably mention 5 more times during this webinar, if you've not done something before in Moodle, this maybe isn't the best time to try new things, except for things that you really kind of are comfortable with. For example, multiple choice questions. That's not complicated to add in Moodle. Some of these can be a little bit more complicated. I would stick with multiple choice, true, false, short answer, and essay questions for now. Multiple choice, I can just say add. I don't believe for you that you will need to change something in the category. I think it's because of the access I have in Moodle right now that I see all of those choices. But I could put my question name. So let's say, I'm going to say LRE because I have a special ed background and LRE is an acronym that I would use. So I might say, what does LRE stand for? And then in here, I'm going to actually say that this question is going to be worth 1 point. I'm going to leave the feedback blank for now. And I can decide how I want this to look. So I can shuffle the choices, which is something I really want to do. It keeps students from saying the answer for question number 1 is A. And I can put my answers in here. So I actually know this is least restrictive environment. And I can add that in there and say that's worth 100%. That is the correct answer. And then I could choose low rent experience or other things that LRE might stand for. And then I can save those changes here. And there is my first question. I'm going to go back into that question here for just a minute, and I'm going to show you that there's shuffle the choices on here. You can also choose if you want your choices to be A, B, C, or however you want that to work. And then for things that don't, that would be the incorrect answer, you just want to leave that at none. So go back, add your question, add each of your answers, choose the one that's correct and set it at 100%. And then you can save your changes and go back to your quiz. I also want to show you, you can go under add and add from question bank. This is a good time for us to lean on some of the publishers that we use. So for example, if you use Cengage for your students, if that's where their textbook comes from, Cengage also often has question banks available. If you want to use a question bank and have, for example, 50 questions in a question bank and you have 10 of them randomly selected for each of your students, that's another time you want to fill out that form that Courtney has added to the chat, and let someone from our team help walk you through how to add questions from a question bank. Also, when I have multiple questions added, I tend to click this button right here, which will shuffle the questions within my quiz. You may have a quiz that you want students to take questions or answer questions in a specific order, in which case you don't want to click that. But if you want to add questions and have those questions mixed around, as well as the answers within the question, click this shuffle box. Finally, on quizzes, I will tell you that up here, everything is set a maximum grade of 10. If I had 20 questions in here, I actually am going to change that to 20. You can determine how many points each of your questions are worth. They automatically are set at 1, but I could change that and say this question is worth 5 points. I sometimes, I sometimes will do that if I have a question, not a multiple choice question, as much as if I have a short answer question or an essay question. So I'm going to save that as it is. I'm going to go back here up on top and kind of use these breadcrumbs to navigate back to that module that I was working in. So here I am in module 1. I've gone through and I've added an assignment. I've added a forum. I've added a quiz. And now I want to talk through adding resources. These are actually at the top of my module because these are the things I want students to use first. This is where I want them to get their information from so they can do the assignments. So I'm going to go back to this add an activity or resource. And this time, instead of activities for students to use, I'm going to add a resource. I would recommend for our purposes that you add a file, a label, a page, or a URL. They all look pretty similar when we go to add this, but I'm going to quickly go through each one. So if you add a file, it again takes you, you should be starting to feel comfortable with this, I hope. It takes you to a page. Hold on. It takes you to a page where you have the name of the file, a description of the file. You can drop and drag it here for students to be able to see and access that. I know some of you have things, for example, on a PDF that you want to share with students. This is a great place to be able to do that. Add a file and just drop and drag your PDF here, or click on the file picker and choose your PDF from your computer and add it that way. The appearance is set in new window. You want to leave this as it is. There's other options such as in pop-up, but especially for right now as we're going online with some of these things that we haven't had online previously, we know students are sometimes going to be working off of their phones or iPads, and it actually will be most helpful for them to not have a pop-up, but to open it in that new window. I'm going to go back here, and instead of adding a file, this time I'm going to say I want to add a label. That's what I've used in my course site already, where I said things like begin the module. So I might want to say begin the module. And I can save and return that to return to course. And I will see, just like when I add other activities, it shows up right at the bottom here, and then I can move it to wherever I want in the course. Court interrupted here. Thank you, Court, about adding an audio file. Yes, one way you could add an audio file is to go back here and choose File. And you could add the audio file this way. And when you are adding the file, how I said you can take like a PDF and pull it over here. You could also go up here and click this button and add your video or audio. For our purposes, I'm going to show you another way to add video. This is not where I would recommend adding video, but I would recommend that if you have audio, you can put that in here this way. All right. We're going to go back to add an activity or a resource, and we're going to go down here, past file, past label, and we're going to talk about adding a page. We'll click on add. Again, you have this open page where you can add what you're going to put in this page. When we add a page, adding a page, whoops. You have this description box like you do for all of the other activities, although we're adding a resource here, not an activity. But I often skip over that because you don't need to have a description in there. You do need to have some page content. So this page gives you all of the information you need for whatever it is that you might need to share with students on a page. This is also the spot where I would recommend, if you have a video, that you can embed your video. To do that, you actually are going to click on this button here. And this button here, this is just HTML writing. And I'm going to go real quickly. I'm going to switch over. Give me just a second. I'm going to switch over to my YouTube, and I'm going to grab something from my YouTube channel. This is where you want to keep your videos saved. And I'm going to grab and copy right here the things that, when I go under share, has those same carrots. So I'm going to copy it. And I'm going to go back into my Moodle page. Let me go back just for a minute. So here's my page that I was writing. I'm going to hit this caret, which is the same caret I just saw. I'm going to paste that information in there that I took from YouTube. And now I've got my video embedded right inside of this page for students. Okay, I know that's one of the big questions we have is about videos and how to get these out to students. I would recommend adding it in a page if you are able. I also would tell you that Scott Strand is going to be leading a couple of webinars specific to adding media to your courses. So if this is something you want to learn more about, I would recommend sitting in on one of those webinars with Scott. So I'm going to hit save and return to course. And I can see that page that I added is here. And when I click on it, there's the information I added. And here's the video that I've added ready to go. I'm going to toggle back here. And I'm going to do add an activity or a resource. And I'm going to show you one more thing, which is adding a URL link. This is another way that you can add, for example, a video. If you wanted to, you can take that URL and share it here. So I could copy that. And I could call this whatever the name of this video is that students need to watch. And I can put that link directly in there. You could also put a URL in there if you wanted them to go to another website to do maybe some research from a website. If you have a URL you want them to use to access something they need to read online. This is also a great time, by the way, to lean on our library. They have so many great resources for us to use, and they also can help you be able to access things that students otherwise might not be able to access as easily. There's a lot of things that typically cost us money that kind of some of those fees are being lifted right now as we kind of get through this time together. So lean on the library a lot if you have questions about resources. I'm going to show you, instead of adding a page, if you add a URL, I can click on that, and that also takes me right to my video. All right. Again, I know this is a lot of information in what's actually not a short amount of time because we're spending an hour and a half together. But are there any questions on adding a resource before I spend the last few minutes talking about grading? All right. Let's go through and let's talk just a little bit about grading, because that's also going to be so important to understand and have in place for our students. If I go over here, I can click on grades, and this will take me to my grade book in Moodle. And you can see my students are already listed here, as well as all of those activities that are set up in my course site. I've already talked through what it looks like to grade and to view all submissions and then hit grade. And if I had done that on some of these, the grade would already show. Or for example, these students took their sample quiz, here's their grades. My students have not finished any of the other assignments, or at least I have not graded the other assignments, except for it looks like an introduction that they did. All of your assignments will show in one long list here, with the exception of forums. Those are something you need to add separately. So I'm going to show you how to do that and how to just organize this a little bit better. So when you go into your gradebook, if you go to gradebook setup, you can see all of the assignments that are in my Moodle course are listed here. Everything's listed except for the forums here, and you'll see actually those are in black versus the rest of these that are in blue that give me a link to the actual assignment. If you use forums in your course and need to add a forum, the way to do that is in your grading, go down here where it says add grade item and COVID-19 forum. If that's the forum that I added, that's my name. I might want to say it's worth 10 points, and I've clarified to students how those 10 points look, what they need to do for it. and I can hit Save Changes. And I can see that down at the bottom, here's the forum that I've added. If I want to group some of my things together, which is a really great way to look at grading and weight certain categories, that's what is set up here, these little folders. Each one is a separate category. So here's a category called participation. You can see everything together here equals 20% of a student's grade. So each one of these individually is worth 10 points, but collectively, participation is worth 20%. There's minor assignments. This is where you might put some things like journals or worksheets that you have students do. You might want to group that together in something called minor assignments, or you could call it worksheets. You can decide what's best for your course and assign that a percent. What's important to know is that these percents for each of your categories, that those add up to 100% for your entire course. So you can see the course total here is 100%. To add a category, you press this button here that says Add Category. And I could add a category, for example, called Quizzes. And I might decide that my quiz category should be worth 15% of the total grade. So I could add that there. We'll continue. And you will see I now have, oops, there was already a folder called Quizzes, but I have the Quizzes folder that I made worth 15%. If I wanted to use that and get rid of the other one, I can move my quizzes over here. I'm just going to select those, and I'm going to go down here, move selected items. I should have called that quiz 2, I guess, so we could keep it separate, but I'm going to go to quizzes, and it's going to move my graded items into that folder that I created that says 15% is the total weight that carries for quizzes in my course. I can also go to that forum that I created. I can click on that, and I can move that up on top to that participation section, just where I think, for me, it makes most sense to put forums. I also want to caution you, when you are adding activities to your course site, assignments, forums, quizzes, things like that, you will see that we have this set up so that everything is worth the same amount within a category. This will help your grading calculate in the way that you most likely want it to calculate, by keeping everything the same. We really would suggest 10 points or 100 points if it makes sense at all for the work that you're having students do. And then to put those together in categories. So you can see all of the major assignments for this Moodle course are worth 100 points. And then all of those grouped together are worth 50% of a student's total grade. When I go to view grades for each of my students, then I can go across and I can see Benjamin Moodle, and I can go through each of his assignments. As I've graded it, it will show up. I can also see on top, if I want to look just at minor assignments, I can see these are all the things that fit under minor assignments. If I don't want to deal with those right now because I have so many grades to look at, I can click on that, and that will shrink those minor assignments and close that up. I can then look just at major assignments. If I want to look at major assignments, I can also click on the link to the actual assignment, I can see actually here, no students have submitted it, so I have nothing to grade. But if they had, I can click on grade and it will take me right to that assignment where I can then grade the assignment. I can see in this one, it's out of 100 points, and I don't have a grading guide or rubric attached, which is the reason I just have this spot here to put the total number of points. If there was a grading guide attached, it would show up right here on the right-hand side. And I can see this is set like I showed you earlier, that this is no additional attempts needed, but I could change this to a yes if a student submits something and I actually want them to redo it. So that's a little bit about the grade book. And I'm going to go back here to the middle. Okay, Courtney's letting me know there's a question about if we should change Moodle setup from the current setup to a weekly structure. I'm not sure I completely understand the question. Can you clarify what you mean by a weekly structure?
So they currently have it set up so that they have their assignments /our assignments. And okay. So they're wondering if they should change the listing on Moodle to a weekly structure in this new online format.
What do you think, Court?
So I didn't fully know what we were advising people to do just because we want to keep it easy for everybody.
Yeah.
From my experience, I would say that having a weekly structure is very helpful for students.
Mm-hmm.
So I would recommend as best as possible to move it into a weekly structure. And if you need help with that, use that link that we provided earlier. I can, at the very end of this, I will also put it in the chat again, just so it's further down and accessible. But yeah. I would recommend trying to get it into a weekly schedule as best as possible, just for the ease of student use and navigation.
Yeah. I would agree with that. I think it's easier for students, like you said, Courtney, I think it's easier for students to navigate. I also think it's easier for instructors to be able to navigate. And we know that during this time, you're also probably going to need to make adjustments to your syllabus and really look at the assignments you have in there and which are most important. And it doesn't mean that things that you have in there were not important to begin with, but they just may need to look different going forward. And that's what our instructional design team is really there to help with. So if you want to just sit with somebody and think through ways that those assignments might look a little bit different, or just ways that you can set up your Moodle course beyond all of this information that I know was just given to you this morning, I really encourage you to just fill out that form and we can take it another step from here and get a little bit more detailed. I want to keep us on track, and I know we just have about 3 minutes left. So if you have any other questions you want to make sure we address right here, can you make sure to put those in the chat? If not, I hope this has been helpful for you. I know it's so much information, and this is really not the way any of us would love to. None of us really want to be in this predicament here that we're in, but I hope you can see that there are so many things we do have in place. There are so many great ways that we can use Moodle, that we can keep things going smoothly for ourselves and for our students. Takes a little bit of work to set up, but there are lots of options out there, and I hope you feel a lot of support from our team to just come alongside everybody right now that needs the support. We're here to help you think through things, to put assignments in there, quizzes in there, to just get your Moodle page up and running. Again, so it's not just easier for students, but it's easier for you as well to navigate, as we want to make sure students keep learning and we're able to keep teaching. So if you have questions, let us know. Please don't hesitate to reach out. Is there anything left in the chat that you want me to address before we say goodbye? Court, I'll wait for you to chime in since you can see the chat and I can't see it right now.
Yes, so I am seeing thank yous, and I just posted the request for the form or to move for extra support moving your course online.
Excellent. All right. And thanks to Liam for joining us today as well. I can hear him in the background there.
Yes.
Thanks everybody for your time and attention. I know this is 90 minutes of a lot of information. So we'll get this link up as well and share it out. Thanks for being willing to let us record this as we just kind of navigate all of this together. So have a good day. Don't be afraid to reach out to us for anything. Thanks, guys.